Hello, and welcome back to Why Geopolitics Matter, the podcast. In this week's episode, we discuss the further details coming up about the sinking of a Russian ship that may have been carrying nuclear reactors. Then also we'll talk about the US and China summit and the outspoken criticisms from Zelensky towards the US administration. So let's get into it. In this week of political shenanigans, we have to talk about the king of dancing in the new Hungarian government. It's the future health minister. Yes, he is the same guy from a couple of episodes back when we talk about the parliamentary election results celebration. And well, he does it again outside the building of the Hungarian parliament at Magyar's inauguration ceremony. So imagine the video for those who haven't seen it. The setting is this massive neo-Gothic parliament of Budapest in the background, and there's a huge crowd in the square, people waving Hungarian flags, they have their phones out, recording everything. To me, it felt like supporters watching a football final. It was so meaningful. I mean, everyone was enjoying this very symbolic change of administration, right? What do you guys think of that?
I absolutely agree. And I just love how enthusiastic he is. And
Mm.
even like he had his moment where he was dancing around in his crazy dance, and which is perfect. But
Yeah.
also like other people started dancing with him, and it was
Hmm.
just it felt like it was a moment of absolute freedom for the country to not have it. Just really symbolized that whole thing where, like, Orban had this control over everybody, but now everybody's just free to dance.
He grooved like Cusco, honestly. Like, he was just dancing all around. And it was, yeah, like a complete expression of freedom. And
Mm.
he just like burst out. And it was wonderful, honestly.
Yeah, it was like seeing a politician dancing, jumping around. He was throwing his arms around. He was doing I learned the name of one of the steps, the duck walk. Like the
Yeah.
signature step from the AC/DC guitarist. And
Yeah.
with his imaginary guitar going like this, he also did something with his arms that I would not be able to do it. Like, I'm pretty sure that back in his university years, he had a lot of experience clubbing.
He knows
Yes.
definitely the dance floor.
Yeah. And yeah, Magyar was also like celebrating as well, but not as carefree, let's say. But he was still like clapping and keeping his serious image. I guess that's still important.
Well, he kinda looked like he was enjoying himself too. He knew, like, everybody really loved the dancing, so he was just like, "Yep, I love this. I'm enjoying watching you do this."
Yeah, the party knows very well what the people like. So they probably asked him like, go do your thing. And the fact that the clips go viral, I think it's going to give the party a very positive political image. It's going to give them a very strong start.
Probably more like a good popular opinion. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good vibes
exactly.
right out the gate.
Yeah. A little bit of what Macron has been doing. Macron has been trying to interact with younger people and like bringing this for show moments, but in different ways, or yeah, trying to bring some positive light on his government. And I think that at least on the social media, it counts, especially for people who are not French. Like, we look at these videos and yeah, people think, huh, this is a good pal, or this is a funny
Yeah.
pal.
Yeah. I believe like his communication board did, I mean, trying to be objective, it's kind of hard still. But
Yeah.
his communication board did a great job, especially for non-French people. French
Hmm.
people, like, we know what he's doing in the country, so it's harder to have this step back. And he is really like flirting with all these recent trends about um, like the funk music being like doing like very badass clips about French politics and the French army and all that. So
Yeah.
flirting with that, it works internationally internally, I'd say it's so-so.
I have my collection of clips, Macron clips. All right, let's move to our first topic. So, Antoine, what has been coming up about this situation with the sinking Russian ship that was apparently carrying nuclear reactors to North Korea?
Yes. So in December 2024, a Russian cargo ship sank near the Spanish coast in the Mediterranean Sea. This story is important because it is about much more than a simple shipwreck. According to the recent reporting, the Russian cargo ship may have been carrying nuclear reactor components, possibly bound for North Korea, before it sank under unclear circumstances near Spain. So if that is true, it suggests, first of all, a far deeper military relationship between Moscow and Pyongyang than a simple exchange of ammunition or political support. And we've also seen in the past years a clear escalation of the relationship between Pyongyang and Moscow with the sending of troops to Ukrainian front. From a geopolitical point of view, the case matters for, I would say, three reasons. The first one is that it points a possible transfer of highly sensitive nuclear technology to North Korea, which would, of course, strengthen Pyongyang's military capabilities and furthermore pose serious threats to the region between Japan and South Korea. Second, it highlights how the Russia-North Korea partnership has become more strategic and more openly transactional, with the previous transaction between technology transfer and soldier transfers. Now it has stepped up, I would say, relatively importantly and dangerously. And third of all, the circumstances of the sinking raised the possibility that the cargo was intercepted or sabotaged, which would mean someone acted to stop potentially dangerous transfer. Someone was aware of this transfer. I'd say the case is still not fully settled. Some details come from journalistic investigation rather than official confirmation. So the exact cargo and the cause of the sinking remain very much uncertain. But even with that caution, the bigger picture is clear. Uh, this episode reflects a much more serious and militarized Russia-North Korea relationship, and it raises major question about the proliferation of nuclear technologies, the covert logistics as well of Russia, and all the questions with its phantom fleets, and lastly, the security in Europe and beyond. Because we're not only talking about security in the Chinese Sea with South Korea, Japan being impacted, but as well with the war in Ukraine that could be impacted by another massive support from North Korea sending troops in the region.
Yeah, something that caught my attention as well was that the possible components that reportedly were in the ship could be used to develop um, nuclear powered submarine, and that, as you were saying, that increases North Korea's military capabilities. That means that you have a submarine that will last for longer on itself without the need to get back full resources. So you'll have North Korea, or you would have North Korean submarines undetected. You would not be able to know where, for how long they have been out there. And that increases maneuvering, let's say, the distance that they could go to. So it's something that neighboring countries will, and even the United States should look at more closely.
It directly directly impacts, I would say, even the entire world because it gives
Mm.
North Korea leverage and an important leverage on every other countries because it would become de facto another nuclear country. So that is very important, and it raises also like a civil future transaction between Russia and North Korea because, of course, it's amazing that you have a nuclear submarine, but you still need the fuel to run it.
Mhm.
So, as we know, Russia is still one of the main supplier of uranium and of nuclear resources. So it would give also a leverage for Moscow to control, or at least enable them for another transaction with North Korea, which would continue to be still very dangerous for the rest of the world.
The other thing is that Russia is still able to work in this shadow economy by using their shadow fleet to turn off their trackers, endanger other maritime vessels, and that's what this boat did. It turned everything off until it needed to be rescued, which is how Russia has been operating and moving all of their products to sell around. So they're skirting all the way around Ireland to get their stuff over to North Korea. So it endangers maritime activities, but it also nobody knows what's in it, so that could be an environmental issue as well off the coast of Spain, so you don't know what exactly is in there. That's gonna be like a huge problem between the two countries 'cause, that's what I took away from it. I thought it was, definitely one of those, issues that needs to be brought up when people talk about maritime trade and making sure that everybody has their safety mechanisms working properly. This also keeps the Russian war economy going because they're able to sell all those products by avoiding sanctions. So it's just so complicated that it hits all these different parts of everything that's going on in the world right now.
Yeah. To be honest, it makes me think very much about the explosion and the sabotage of Nord Stream 2 pipelines. Because you have so much possible deniability of what's going on. First,
Mhm.
from Russia, because, well, you don't know what they are going and what they are doing with these ships. And second, for any potential external actor who would, for example, for this ship, potentially sabotage it, or uh, there is even people mentioning a submarine that's torpedoed the ship. So it gives potential deniability of everything that's going on with these shadow fleets and the possibility for any external actor to do whatever they want on these ships. So it could very much also go through further to the coast of Somalia and be targeted by pirates. And there, like, how would you be able to say that, okay, we messed up and we have potential nuclear weapons in the hands of pirates, or any potential non-state actors would be very interested in buying some of these weapons.
Definitely.
All right. Now let's continue to our second subject of today's session. So it's the big news. The This week, Beijing received Donald Trump and a big group of people, ranging from White House representatives to a parade of corporate elite of the U.S., including Elon Musk, Tim Cook from Apple, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA. That's very important. Other executives from BlackRock, Boeing, Visa, MasterCard, Meta. So overall, we have tech industry, AI related, aviation, and yeah, it's pretty much uh, the most successful businesses in the US. Now, this visit is particularly important because it's the first presidential visit in almost 10 years. The last one was in 2017, November 2017, and it was Mr. Trump as well. And the imagery clearly mattered. As usual, red carpets, honor guards, massive Chinese and American flags in Beijing. Uh, Xi Jinping received Trump inside the Great Hall of the People, which is one of the most symbolic buildings of the Chinese statecraft. Um, she also personally escorted Trump through the gardens where they had centuries old trees and roses. Apparently, Trump was amazed with the roses, the most beautiful roses anyone has ever seen. And she is going to send him some seeds of those roses. So, in terms of the diplomatic one-to-one situation, it was very successful. And I think that they knew that Trump values this personal diplomacy and spectacle. And he seemed to receive it well as well. He praised Xi for several things, like, oh, he's a really good businessman, but also a very warm person. So yeah, in diplomatic terms, between them two, it was great. However, in terms of business or deals, we don't know much yet. Marco Rubio said in an interview that he couldn't disclose much, that there would be an official statement telling the public what was agreed on. But so far, all we know is that China will buy about 200 Boeing jets, and there will be a potential agreement to buy 750 more. Well, the 200 jets were little compared to what the CEO of Boeing was expecting. Apparently, the deal was supposed to be for 500, and it turned out to be 200 for now. But we'll see in the future. And that there will be purchases of billions of dollars in soybeans. There are different reportings. Apparently, tariffs were not discussed a lot, but they also talked or agreed on the creation of a board of trade. This means that they will create this like committee that will initially try to find products where tariffs could be lowered. And so I don't know, to me, if there had been any real breakthroughs, Trump wouldn't have been able to conceive it to himself. He would be telling the public right away, oh, we did this, we agreed on this. But what I take away from it is that there was a message sent, and that's that the the US and China have a closer relationship now than before, which could be sends a warning signal to for example, Taiwan. Like, imagine me as a Taiwanese citizen seeing Xi Jinping and Trump just shaking hands and enjoying their time together. This erodes the trust that I have in the US backing. Even if they didn't agree on anything Taiwan related specifically, it still signals a more cooperative approach, and that it puts in danger the backing that previous presidents have been very strong about, let's say. But this time it felt like it was more ambivalent from Trump's side. He did say that the US is not looking to have wars, apparently, and that if the situation keeps being as it is, China is going to be okay with that, which I totally disagree with. We're not looking to have somebody say, let's go independent because the US is backing us. So he tries to stay in his same stance, but also giving like small signals that he's not going to do anything for Taiwanese independence. And as I was saying, I don't think that he understands that the status quo is not going to continue forever, and that at some point China will try to force itself on Taiwan. But I guess that for now, as long as it doesn't happen during his administration, he doesn't need more problems, right?
Well, I also read something really interesting about the meeting during the Great Hall of the People. President Xi said that the world had reached a new crossroads. His quote is, "Can China and the United States overcome the Thucydides trap and establish a new paradigm for relations between great powers?" So the trap is the idea when an established great power is met with a rising power, conflict between the two is certainly likely, if not inevitable. So he's saying that we're getting to the point where we're going to have to fight because Taiwan is such an issue. But I don't think that Trump cares enough to really go to war with that because it doesn't benefit him. If he can get more oil or put down a power that has been challenging the United States easily for however long, like Venezuela, but try to challenge Iran because he wants to show off that he is as powerful as he is. But going against China and how powerful they are at this point, because they have a lot of things that the United States wants, and that comes down to critical rare earth minerals. And having 70% of the world's rare earths, access to all of them, is going to be a huge thing in the future, and China knows it. And when he brings up this trap, he's saying that there is going to be a conflict, there is going to be a challenge to the hegemon. So it was that was a moment that I thought kind of changed the, balance, but, as as you said, most of it hasn't been released. We haven't heard everything. We heard about the Boeing planes, but we haven't really heard everything that has been successful during this, it's not a state visit, it's just a work trip.
I think on what you said, I would say that that's probably why we see that much the US going back to uh, previous countries that they've been ousted of. I'm thinking about mostly African countries, but Nigeria, they started again some military operations, at least some military backing of the Nigerian military, which would potentially give leverages for the US to obtain some resources. And it's definitely the same for what has happened in Democratic Republic of Congo, where they've been involved in the peace agreements between the DRC and Rwanda. So that would be interesting as well to see how they would be able to maintain that much of a grip on external resources. But also, I would say that Taiwan remains important, especially because of semiconductors, and it's the I would say the biggest advantage that they have. And if Trump's would do something, it would probably be around that. And it would be economically speaking and not in terms of military or any other powers, but potentially more about more economic related.
Yeah, the whole conversation around semiconductors and chips, it's very interesting from what I read. These other companies, right, like financial companies, AI and tech, were there in order to hopefully get access to the Chinese market. Like, we cannot deny that the Chinese population and their demand would mean a lot for those companies. However, and I think that we have to be precise here, NVIDIA would not sell their latest and like most modern chips to China because the US has been putting on restrictions on those so that Chinese don't get ahead in AI terms or technology. So at the same time, I was thinking, so what's the objective? Only like selling the oldest models of the chips, or now apparently China doesn't want to get them. That's why the head of NVIDIA was there. So there is a depth to that that I'll have to get more familiar with.
It's something to do with the ASML, chips that come out of, is it Denmark or Netherlands? I can't remember, it's somewhere in that area, but they're
I think it's
getting.
probably Netherlands. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the second best chip that they've got, but the AI, like DeepSeek that's created this, they don't need the power of, the best chip because they were able to make it without needing that much power.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically, they're saying, "We don't need it anymore because we're able to do it on something that's not as good, so we'll just keep going with this so we don't have to give away anything," that negotiation process. So, having that saying, "Well, what else you got? We don't need it," like, trying to, like, say, "We can do something better," or whatever. But, yeah, but the agricultural thing is a big thing for Trump as well. He really loves his farmers, and when they don't have gas or fertilizer, which is what happens in the Strait of Hormuz, they're gonna get mad, and it's gonna affect next year's agriculture, and then they're gonna have to get a bailout, and he doesn't want to have to do that, because it looks bad for him, and midterms are coming up at the end of the year, so he wants to be able to say that he has been able to do something for his constituency. with this trip. So I think they're trying to organize it at this point of saying, how did how did we do well? So trying to figure out a way to put that in the best possible light for Americans.
Also, there was a rumor right before the summit or visit or whatever you want to call it that they would try to get China to invest around $3 million in the US. And I don't think anything until now has been said about it. I think it would bring a lot of negative reaction from the Republicans. And maybe at the end they saw that and they dropped the idea.
Well, they've been telling them for so long that they don't want any Chinese infrastructure because if there is Chinese infrastructure, then they'll be able to get into your homes. And they've been scaremongering for so many years that if they were to come around and be like, "Hey, you're gonna have a Chinese phone now. You can get Huawei. Like this is gonna be great. You should buy their products and use all the TikTok you want." But people don't have that short of memories, I think. I want to believe that they think that I think that they've just been scaremongering for so long. They don't want to like lose that balance, if that makes sense.
Now, let's continue with our third and final topic. So, Meredith, tell us a little bit more about these criticisms from Zelensky and like the whole, situation.
So, American backed peace talks to end the fighting in Ukraine have been halted since late February when the first bombs fell in Tehran. In pushing Ukraine to trade territory for peace, the Trump administration is still choosing a strategy of putting more pressure on the Ukraine side than on Russia. And Zelensky's been complaining about the 28-point peace plan from late 2025, which would require Kyiv to surrender territory and significantly reduce the size of its army and relinquish some types of weaponry, according to some of the officials from the United States that are familiar with the proposal. So Ukraine is no longer seeking as much support from America since it has had years to build up its own defense production. So now Kyiv is also openly looking for support elsewhere. Uh, Zelensky has been publicly grateful for continued support from Germany and Italy for helping
Mm.
Ukraine while the war in Iran threatens Kyiv's supply of weapons. He has also reached agreements to help other countries in the Middle East to defend themselves against Iranian drones. We've heard lots of reporting about this in the UAE. And these are significant deals that would build new security relationships as well as reinvest in their own defense industry, which is important because if you're able to sell the products as well as manufacture them, you've got that war economy that Russia has been living off of. So I guess Ukraine is kind of taking in that since it's been such a long time and they're not able to grow their economy anywhere else in their current state. So Kyiv is still reliant on the US in other aspects when it comes to intelligence and the Patriot interceptor missiles, which are very crucial for what's happening on the front lines. But most of all, the US is the great power that is able to play mediator between Ukraine and Russia. The US allowed sanction exemptions for Russian oil during the Iran war. And that has been a big problem for many Europeans in general, but it's something that Ukraine has been very vocal about. And they're also not happy with the fact that they haven't been getting any meetings with Trump's negotiators. That's Steve Witkoff, who is his golfing buddy, and Jared Kushner, his son in law, who's also financially backed by Saudi Arabia for his hedge fund. So they're both interesting characters, but they've been spending a lot more time in Russia and they haven't visited Kyiv at all. So it really underscores the frustrations that the Ukrainians have been feeling left behind on all of this. So they're kind of trying to make more relationships with a whole bunch of different people now that they know the US is kind of checked out.
Well, I would say that was kind of predictable since the beginning of the war when we were seeing, I think it was still the Biden's administration. It was more like a contractual assistance to Ukraine, where it was like, okay, you can use our weapons, but only to a certain degrees. which completely prevented Ukraine from targeting effectively Russian military sites and strategic sites. And then with the unpredictability of the Trump's administration and seeing that they are nearly on the edge of dropping NATO, and at least they are sure dropping of European countries on a lot of points. Well, it's a continuous political pull, I would say,
Hmm.
from the US, especially in Europe. And that's probably as well why we see that much that Trump is not that much interested in Europe anymore and is facing more towards the Pacific.
Well, I do want to challenge you a little bit on the Biden administration because I think they didn't know what capabilities Russia would strike back with. I think they wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be a massive nuclear weapon that headed towards Ukraine. So they tried to do it in a way of keeping Ukraine in a defensive mode instead of offensive.
Yeah, more
But
like trying to prevent an escalation. I completely
yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was trying to prevent escalation, don't fire into the country. But towards the end, they were firing into the country. But I think now they're hitting more of the infrastructure, but they are having problems with stray drones that are going into
Yeah.
other countries because the prime minister of Latvia resigned last week because of having bad communications with Ukraine. So I
Hmm.
think like it does have an impact of when if your military stuff isn't good enough to be able to be effective, but if the US would have been like, here's all the military equipment you could possibly need, it'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
we're coming after NATO now. And
That would have been Third World War, definitely.
yeah, 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 yeah. I think it was just, I I think that was the one thing that the Biden administration did okay on to start with, but, like, of course, they dithered way, way later and, of course, never got out of the situation. So, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think it was also like very complicated at this moment because it was almost the end of its administration of this administration, but it was very complicated to see already that the war would last for so long.
Yeah. So it was February 2022, like right in the middle of his administration, he just botched getting out of Afghanistan. And then a year and a half later, Israel had their October 7th attack. So, I mean, their administration, like, I don't think they knew what to do with themselves. So they were just trying to keep afloat as much as possible, but trying not to piss off Russia was high on the agenda.
I think that, as you were saying, the United States backing was checked out. Like, Zelensky knows this, and it's already out of the picture, so he has to look other ways, and being more outspoken, something that he did not do at the beginning of Trump's administration, because you have to be very careful around Trump and trying to have his backing at the beginning. I think it all went out the window at this point, and he's able to criticize, and that is also, being outspoken is also a way of bringing the conversation back in the spotlight, because with these other crises that we've been having, with the Iran war, with Israel, with the even the China visit, um, the Ukraine discussion has lost its the spotlight in the public opinion. So this is another way of bringing it back and mobilizing resources, reminding European countries that this is still taking place and the importance of it.
I totally agree. And he's learning from the best, from Maloney and Sanchez and Spain. So those leaders are fighting against him now. People are talking back because you can
Hmm.
only really get him to respond by like standing up to him.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And stay tuned to keep unpacking why geopolitics matter. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
For more articles on why geopolitics matters, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at whygeopoliticsmatter.com.